that fight against racism resonates beyond America's borders. These
who take pleasure in twilight, whose souls are lured by noise to every treacherous abyss.
As night falls, another Austin emerges, almost as though another city exists in an alternate dimension.
Because last night, the weirdest thing happened.
And in that world exists the underbelly of crime, drugs, and terror in the night. In the deep night, there is terror of women being raped, the sexual abuse of small children, gangs and drug kings.
I actually think this whole flap, whatever the Russians may have intended with their hacking, has made it much more...
In my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again.
When you hear General Mack
for the truth to sink in.
The CIA director.
To kind of catapult the propaganda.
Hardliners on Russia.
14-foot cobra with 9-inch fangs, firing lasers out of the size of 17 Godzillas, shooting flying saucers out of them.
I have two words for you. Predator drones.
I'm gonna bomb the shit out of them.
You will never see it coming.
I don't care.
So you understand the words I'm saying to you?
You think I'm joking?
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is that there are known knowns and that there are known unknowns. But there's also unknown unknowns. Things we don't know that we don't know.
They are not what they claim to be.
America is now under martial law.
PsiOp Radio.
Decoding the psychological warfare machinations within paranormal and parapolitical landscapes. PsiOp Radio.
Welcome aboard, everybody. This is PsiOp Radio number 234 for June 7th, 2020. I'm Smiles Lewis.
And I'm Mack White.
And Mack, I'm so blessed and thankful to be here with you virtually again. These are some of the strangest times in my life, and I believe probably the strangest times in many people's lives on this planet simultaneously. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, and these are strange times. I actually think that this is worse than the 60s. It took a while for the 60s to really ramp up. The 60s as we know them. This took overnight, and it's been coming for a while.
Yes.
And so here we are. and the other thing is, it's, we have social media now. What if we had social media in the 60s? None of us would have ever survived it.
Yeah.
Seriously. People need to know what's going on, and what's going on is not. I am not a happy camper. To tell you the truth.
I know you have your moments, but I tend to think of you as being a happy fellow, a very warm, wonderful, loving fellow, good father and family man, and you've always been a good friend, and I know you've got a great moral compass, which is why I love doing these shows with you. But at the same time, I know that you get ticked off sometimes. And
I sure do.
And you're very articulate and expressive, and I appreciate that about you. It's one of the things I love. So, I agree. This is of course, I didn't live through the 60s. I was born in 1971. I am fast approaching 50, and I have, of course, I think we were reminded last episode about the people comparing the pandemic that was going on during the Woodstock era and how strange and different things are now. As you say, there wasn't social media. We relied more on the mainstream media. And, as much as they're a part of the problem, good, true investigative journalism and honest First Amendment truth-telling is still the backbone of a civilized society. But unfortunately, as evidenced by mostly by the cops and of course the protesters that have turned violent, but there's no shortage of anger and animosity and bad behavior in the human gene pool out there.
Absolutely. And what we're seeing here, I'm just pulling up this news story, which really disturbs me. We are seeing an unprecedented attack on journalists. Now, I saw this during the Democratic Convention 1968. Journalists, newscasters on the floor there at the convention were being roughed up by, goons. But I've never seen anything like this. And this headline right here that we've got, we crunched the numbers. Police, not protesters, are overwhelmingly responsible for attacking journalists. This comes from The Intercept. And I've never seen anything like this. I'm just going to, read a couple of quotes here. We are witnessing a truly unprecedented attack on press freedom in the United States, with journalists are being systematically targeted while covering the nationwide protest over the killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police. The scale of the attacks is so large, it can be hard to fathom. At the U.S. Press Freedom Tracker, a project of the Freedom of the Press Foundation and the Committee to Protect Journalists, we cataloged 150 press freedom violations in the United States in all of 2019. We are currently investigating 280 from just the last week. And I have seen this with my own eyes. I've seen CNN attacked, arrested. I've seen Fox News arrested, and it goes on and on and on. Wow.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We've got links to over at PsiOpRadio.com that'll redirect you to our little blog site, and we've got a ton of links like we always have. And as in past shows, we've posted a bunch that we're going to try to touch on tonight. And this is it. The Intercept is the one here. We crunched the numbers, and a ton of other news articles about the police brutality, and of course, so much of it caught live on TV, and thankfully so, actually, because it really does drive home. When you get that POV. It really drives it home. These Australian journalists and cameramen who were had their camera and themselves slammed and by riot shields wielded by the police, and that I think that's the one I think that was part of the crazy Washington, D.C. clearing of the streets for the now infamous photo op by our resident rump in chief. Yeah. And that is a whole other news story we might get into. But yeah, absolutely. There seems to be an open attack against the media. And actually we have some other articles that the cops, I am not denying, obviously, that there's rioting going on by rioters, and those are different than activists and protesters. And I understand how that kind of violence and collateral damage by these rioters is likely to trigger police and law enforcement, whatever. But there are so many instances of the cops not just firing and physically it's assaulting the protesters usually, and not even the rioters, quote unquote. But again, these media, these journalists, these news anchors, and so forth, arresting them in some cases, and then. But also going after the medics, the street medics, the people who are there, who are those, essential frontline workers who we've been all about, during the pandemic. But I do want to quickly, before I forget, if these activists in these protests were the MAGA presidential supporters, and armed, do you think, I don't think we'd quite be seeing the same thing. Of course, they have had a history of getting more and more aggressive towards the news outlets with the mantra, the war cry of fake news and whatnot. But And the fact that CNN has taken so much abuse in these instances as well is interesting. And I do wonder, one has to wonder, obviously not all cops across the country are following orders of the president or some other, shadowy hand, but I think it just really gets to the indiscriminateness of the cop violence.
Well, yeah, and is it indiscriminate? Because I'm looking at this Intercept article, and it says here, many of the attacks by police against journalists have been targeted. Many of the attacks have been targeted. There are now literally dozens of videos showing journalists, sometimes live on national television with cameras, microphones, and press badges, clearly indicating to police they are with the media only to find officers purposely firing dangerous projectiles at them anyway. And it goes on here. Listen to this harrowing NPR segment in which multiple journalists, one of them even in tears, describe the terrifying scenarios they have found themselves in as police have turned on them. As Los Angeles Times reporter Molly Hennessy Fisk puts it, we are not caught in the crossfire. They pursued us. And they knew that we were reporters and photographers. And I've seen that on camera. I'm just glad that my newspaper man father didn't live long enough to see this.
Yeah.
This is outrageous.
It is. And again, contrast this with this photo op for the president that was, who was it for? Well, it's for obviously his constituents and hypothetically the public at large, but it's immediately for the media. It's for that channel that, as much as he thinks, and so many of us, myself included, think that there is in fact fake news and whatnot, but from a different context than Rump. I can't say his name, man. I just hate that dude. I don't like to have hate in my heart, Mac, but God bless.
I don't either. I try to avoid it, but I really am not happy with what the police state is doing right now, and I hate them.
Yeah, it's
don't attack journalists.
Don't attack anybody. Yeah.
There's an idea. How about not, cracking somebody's skull open?
Yeah.
Did you see the video of this 75-year-old man, a peace activist, who, he did something I would never do. He actually walked up to the cops. I'd be frightened to do that. And what did they do? Knocked him down. Knocked him. He didn't just fall down. They knocked him down. He flew back on his backside several feet, and blood started pouring out of the back of his head. Now, where have I seen that before?
Yeah.
And one cop in riot gear, tries, he said, wait a minute, we need to take care of this guy. And the other cops yank him back.
Yeah,
video.
That video, and I have watched a little bit more of this stuff because you have to, and I've avoided so much atrocity footage for of late. But yeah, and so if I'm not mistaken, my perception of that was that the two, like, 3 officers converge on him to shove him, and I believe one of the ones who shoved him was the one who had a conscience, had a glimmer of like, I need to help this man.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, was stopped by the others. I think that one man was one of the 2 that I believe have been suspended. And then there's this confusing situation that, again, the media, the way the headlines are reading, it appears to me that so the authorities suspend these 2 officers for assault. The whole group of law enforcement of that special unit resigns, quote unquote, in protest, but not in protest for, of course, having, people in their ranks doing this, but because of obviously the fear of like, well, you want us to go risk our lives out there and you're not going to back us up, because that's really what this thin blue line is all about. The cops aren't going to feel safe if they don't have the state's legitimate monopoly on violence behind them. And that's where this is. I was going to say that's where this is going. I don't know where this is going, but this amazing rise of this issue finally is of course the culmination of so much pain and suffering on the part of minorities and people of color, though obviously the police state abuses everyone. But this has been such a long time coming. You know, all of us civil liberties oriented activists, left, right, center, whatever, have long said that there is a problem here when there is a special class of governmental types, law enforcement, that are allowed time and time again to commit acts of violence and get away with it. And, you know, enough is enough. It's been enough for a long time. And it is honestly, it is amazingly inspiring. The lead, if you go over to PsiOp Radio for tonight's news links, I did a search on thousands march. That was my search term. And yeah, that's a headline all over the world for protests.
Tens of thousands.
In some cases, yes.
It's an incredible, it's amazing.
And, you know, I can't help but be inspired because, again, the majority of this activism is peaceful. And whether you agree with the details of this, that, or the other incident, one has to acknowledge the psychic upwelling of humanity here. And this, again, all in the midst of this crazy-ass pandemic that we've been dealing with for months now, a quarter of a year or more, and parts of the world longer. It is inspiring, and on the one hand, I'm disappointed that I haven't been out there. On the other hand, I'm playing it safe. I ain't as young as I used to be.
Yeah, I wouldn't go out there. I mean, seriously. By the way, the cops in Buffalo, New York, where this happened, who shoved the elderly man, have been charged with second-degree assault. So there's that. But then you have something far worse. Here is that would be Ohio State University graduate, 22 years old, young woman, dies after attending protests in Columbus, Ohio. She was identified on Instagram as Sarah Grossman, who was among protesters showing support for George Floyd, a black man who died in Minneapolis when former Minneapolis Police Chief Derek Chauvin pressed his knee into Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes. This led to protests across the state and the country, including in Columbus. Grossman was in a group sprayed by a chemical agent, according to reports. She may have had respiratory issues, according to social media posts. She died at Sycamore Medical Center in Kettering, near Dayton.
Yeah.
A young woman, 22 years old, and she loses her life over this because she gets out there and does what she thinks is right.
Right.
Oh boy.
And
there's a problem with that.
Again, I know law enforcement has been under attack, and I know there's been murder and beat downs of law enforcement as part of all this craziness. But again, the people with the quote unquote non-lethal weapons that have been so rolled out for so long that we have fought against time and time again as part of being against the militarization of law enforcement and the creation of this ever-growing police state, have killed so many people, have maimed, blinded individuals, shot pregnant women here in Austin with beanbag rounds, shot young men in the head with either rubber bullets or beanbag rounds. Just terrible things happening to these people. And to the best of my knowledge, none of these individuals are the quote-unquote rioters. Yes, in some of these cases, they may have been bystanders to these protests that then did civil disturbances like, oh gosh, they're blocking traffic on IH-35. I was actually nearby when the first taking of I-35 happened in this event a few days ago, or I guess last weekend rather. And boy, I know what it's like to be stuck in traffic because of somebody getting on the roadway or whatever, and it can shut down a city. And I've joked in the past, it's like if you're a quote unquote terrorist, it's really easy to just shut down a city with some very simple traffic related techniques. Not advocating for that, not saying people should do that, but I know a lot of people consider that a valid nonviolent form of protest. But then Mac, I don't know. I sent you a link. I should have actually given you a better chance to watch this video. There's a 3-minute video that my Austin activist friend Debbie Russell, who we've played many times, her appearances before City Council here, and I've quoted her so many times here on the show. She pointed her Facebook friends, myself included, to this video that I would like to play. Let me see if I can bring this up here. I guess, Mac, you'll just be hearing it, but The Cost of Freedom of Speech in Austin is the name of this. Here we go.
Give this man no help.
Somebody fan her.
Pushing the girl, dude. This is fucking wild. If they knew I was recording them right now, I really think they'd be handling this differently. Oh!
These are some disturbing images and sound. I'm sorry.
Fuck you! Hey! What the fuck? What the fuck? You kid?
Stop shooting. Don't shoot. Why are you shooting? Please leave us alone.
Yeah. I mean, these are...
Sorry.
The political issues involved. The thing is that people have the right to protest, and we are living in a climate of fear right now. I'm looking at this story here. This is from defense1.com. Who are they? Unmarked security forces in D.C. spark fear. Mistaken for mercenaries, armed personnel from federal agencies refuse to identify themselves to street protesters and media. the presence of unmarked federal law enforcement officers dressed in paramilitary uniforms and wearing no identifying insignia quickly spread among protesters marching through Washington, D.C. streets on Tuesday and Wednesday, causing concerned protesters and officials to ask, who are they?
Yeah.
Now, I read somewhere that they just, they were asked, who the hell are you? And all they would say is, we're with the Department of Justice. Oh, okay. That clears it up. Really? The Department of Justice?
Yeah. Meanwhile, there's been, of course, the residents' threat of unleashing the military, and that has rightly caused a number of people to go, no. You're supposed to be this guy who claims to be against, that kind of overstep, but at the same time doing everything that we worried about, his predecessors doing their overreach and imposing martial law. I've worried about every president I've lived under doing exactly that, regardless.
They all would.
Yeah.
Republican, Democrat, they would all do the same thing. Dead. You're not going to be safer under Biden than Trump, because there's something that goes much deeper than partisan politics here. And people got to see it. And I think they are seeing it, and I think that's the problem.
So here with this latest crazy ass shit going down here in Austin that some people believe was coordinated. Obviously, criminals pay attention. They have, criminals use police scanners too. And if the old lure somebody over here while you do something over there, is the oldest tactic. And there's been the suggestion that some of the looting at various big box businesses was either coordinated or at least just the taking advantage of those situations. There's been a local headline, I believe, saying that a couple of quote unquote known local Antifa were part of the looting of one of the big box businesses down at the Capitol Plaza next to I-35. Some friends were telling me about the Felony Lane Gang, a roving big crime syndicate out of, I think, Florida, that allegedly does mass types of penny ante stuff. But then there's the stories about that Alex Jones and others have been covering about supposed Antifa or just criminal element, let's just put it that way, breaking into gun stores and stealing lots of guns. That's a little disconcerting, but again, that does not delegitimize the vast majority of good, hardworking, honest people who are out here saying enough's enough, and their concern has been shown to be valid by the overreaction against these peaceful activists and protesters by the police, in my humble opinion. Meanwhile, so here, with this Austin cop riot, this rollout of these non-lethals, less than lethals that can totally be freaking lethal, being used again, and our friend over, I mentioned before, Debmocracy, her Austin Gonzo blog, she's posted a number of things, including this campaign trying to get Police Chief Manley. I believe he was the interim chief after Acevedo left. There may have been some other guy in between there. But after Austin's import from California, Chief Acevedo and all his problems went on to Houston, we got this Officer Manley guy. And I've learned some interesting things. Apparently, so another good blogger, the Grits for Breakfast blogger, if Austin Police Chief Brian Manley won't resign, he needs a new job title. Why? Well, the article opens with, in Austin, city legal staff has told city manager Spencer Cronk that the state civil service code won't allow him to fire Chief Brian Manley, only demote him to chief of staff. This is due to section 143.013 commercial code, I guess, of the Texas Local Government Code, which mandates that if a person is removed from the position of department head, the person shall be reinstated in the department and placed in a position with a rank not lower than that held by the person immediately before appointment as department head. The person retains all rights of seniority in the department. So they can't fire him? What? So, So Democracy says... as community cries reached a fever pitch for our police chief, Brian Manley, to be fired, we learned today our city manager, Spencer Cronk, can't do that because Texas. Fine, then let's use resign as a transitive verb to mean make him resign, because that's what he'll obviously do if given the choice between that and demotion from the top cop job, although I do relish Grit's imaginary titles for him, Grits for breakfast. There are plenty of reasons to resign him well before, there were plenty of reasons before the atrocities of this past weekend. That's where she links to the video we just played, which is all from this past weekend. Not the least of which is his failure to fire Christopher Taylor, who not only shouldn't have killed Michael Ramos, but 9 months earlier had no business shooting and killing Dr. Morris Da Silva, quote-unquote, holding a knife while having a mental health episode. And again, there's so many instances where these cops either aren't getting properly trained or are disregarding any training that they're getting and not treating mental health situations more appropriately and making them fatal. But there's tons of other reasons, and that she goes into... And, you know, she talks about how a lot of people are really like Manley, but he's as responsible as Acevedo. She says, so this past weekend falls in part on Acevedo and former city manager Mark Ott, but while Acevedo used provocateurs and riot cops, and she gives the link providing that, remember the Occupy controversy where it turns out APD had infiltrated them and were giving them weapons of mass destruction? No, that's an overstatement. But there was very little non-lethal force involved. That's on Manley and Cronk. Anyway, there's lots of good links there, including this horrific picture of somebody's naked backside that's been pelted horribly by these beanbag rounds or rubber bullets or whichever it was.
There was a young man by the name of Levi Ayala. This is a Texas Monthly story. It says he went to an Austin protest to watch history and became a tragic part of it when he was hit in the head by these supposedly non-lethal, things that they fire, and he's fighting for his life in the hospital right now. And the stories go on and on. Here's one from the Austonia website. I'm just going to read the headline. What we know about the Texas state student, 16-year-old and pregnant woman, injured by Austin police during protests. Now, how can you possibly make that right? You can't.
Nope. Thankfully, she didn't lose the baby, or her life. The young man, I believe, is likely to they're saying have significant brain trauma that will cause him to have problems telling right from left, which it will obviously take a long time to get used to. This I believe, I'm not sure if it was that young man and the pregnant woman, but I believe that the pregnant woman was one of the ones being treated by these street medics who then were under fire by APD, and then APD forced themselves on her and took her into the police department. I understand the rationale of their thinking there. But aside from the shooting at the medics bit, if that is in fact true and accurate, and I tell you that video, Mac, if you go back and watch that Austin video, the clips are just crazy. I mean, they just open fire, on a mass of people who what they're on a bridge, they're on the interstate. They weren't in danger, and they weren't endangering anyone else. And until the cops open fire. So there's calls for for Chief Manley's resignation. He's, been doing lots of mea culpa and crying real tears or crocodile tears, whichever you want to believe, and saying that they're going to ban the use of these types of rounds against protesters. At some point, there was also either one of these acoustic LRAD crowd dispersal devices that I believe again got purchased through federal grant money by Acevedo and Manley before Acevedo left, I believe. That thankfully wasn't rolled out, but it was nearby. I saw people posting pictures of it parked, a few blocks away between the APD and the Capitol, where the two different protests during that particular weekend were happening. And honestly, it looked more to me like one of those active denial microwave beam cannons on the top, but it's probably not, because I know that. We know that the Army was investigating those, and there was some talk of using them in the domestic sphere, but it was probably just the LRAD, the sonic pain cannon. But so I guess it could have been worse. Meanwhile,
well, there are.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, there are a lot of agendas at work here. And I'm just wondering still about, I'm sure that you've seen the video. It's on YouTube. We have a link to it, I think. Claims raised of cops provoking riots. A shady white man in black seen smashing AutoZone windows. And I saw the video, and here's a guy that is obviously white. He's dressed in black. And he's walking along and just systematically breaking windows in this AutoZone there in Minneapolis.
And being confronted by local protesters who are like, hey, are you a cop?
Yeah, and he looks like a cop. I don't know, but I have to wonder, what is the agenda here? Is this possible that this individual was an agent provocateur? He acts like one, and he's not black. He's dressed in black, like I say, with a black umbrella. That was kind of weird too.
And the pink rimmed gas mask, I think. Yeah.
And what was that all about? Really. Seriously, the guy's obviously white, and he's going in there. Now we're told that Antifa is, being overplayed as a participant in these things, and the neo-Nazis and so forth are the ones really driving this. And I don't know. I'm not there. But I can tell you this. About a week ago, when things were just really, heated up to a fever pitch, a close friend of mine in the comics community, Ryan Carey, posted, because he lives in the neighborhood where this incident happened, the George Floyd murder. He lives there. He lives right around the corner from where it happened, and the riots were completely crazy. And he said that the cops came in and they cleared everybody out, and he said, and then the rest of the night, he said, and I asked for him for permission to repost this on my Facebook timeline. And Ryan said that what he was seeing were openly white nationalist types just speeding up and down the streets, just yeehawing.
Oh, God.
And these neo-Nazi types were given free reign over the neighborhood that night. And this is from a good friend of mine, Ryan Carey. And wow, that got my attention. What's going on? Who's a provocateur? Who isn't a provocateur? Who wants the riots? Who benefits?
A lot of different groups.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think law enforcement really benefits. That's the thing. I think I suppose one might think that a certain segment of the population will feel that the police are justified because they're just responding to this terrible wanton destruction. I don't think so. The overwhelmingly peaceful protests that have come up after those riots, but to me, these are completely separate issues, as far as I'm concerned, of peaceful protest and activism, and the issue at hand, which is perceived and I think very real systemic racism in every aspect of our lives, and absolutely in our quote unquote criminal justice system, and overwhelmingly the witnessing of this police abuse. Just like, okay, you saw it, you might have seen incidents before that maybe made you go, oh, maybe there's a problem there. Well, how could you come away now and not think so, unless you're just like, oh, anybody who would stand up, anybody who would go out and protest deserves this. And I know that there are people like that. I've met people who have that kind of mentality, and it just blows my mind. Because often they're the ones who are, all about, oh, America's so great, and, you can express your opinion, and, First Amendment and all that good stuff, And
until you get your head blown out.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's just so much crazy.
The other thing is that there's a stereotyping of the cops. Now, I have a very good friend, as you know. I think you met him. I'm not going to say his name, and I'm not going to say what police department that he works for here, but he's horrified by this. And what he's told me is that frankly, he, as a veteran policeman in a North Texas town, he's horrified by some of the guys that they're hiring now. He says that even he is afraid of them, And so I don't know what to do with that exactly, but it sounds like that they're hiring the stupidest and the thuggiest people that they can. People that just take any kind of order and just go out and commit mayhem. And I don't know, but this is a small town. And again, my close friend, a police officer, he wonders, what the hell is happening? Why are they hiring these people? What happened to standards of decency? Serve and protect. That's gone out the window.
Yeah. Yeah. I have friends and family who are law enforcement or have been in the past, and I know there are plenty of good people in law enforcement, and that's what's always disturbed me the most is the code of silence among that group, and it's certainly among any group of humans. But again, when it comes to the people who are perceived as the authorities in charge of protecting us and protecting the law, and the law should be the laws themselves should just be about protecting people and property, but again, more importantly, people. It just makes me think again, like one of the men who was killed during these recent cop riots was the food truck owner who served cops. They knew him,
wow.
And then the weird apparent fact that George Floyd worked at the same establishment for years as the man.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, what's the first thing you think? Well, maybe there was a beef between them. Maybe that's what this was about.
Like it.
But then the owner kind of played that down, saying, well, they probably didn't have any interaction, or I don't know of any interaction or anything like that. And maybe that's true, but the synchronicity of that is just a little much. And I'm not, that doesn't make me start suspecting or suggesting that this event itself was a hoax. I mean, for fuck's sake. But because it rings so true of so many of these incidents. Somebody was killed for trying to pass a supposedly fake $20 bill. Whew. What?
Wow, that's quite a penalty. I didn't realize that was the death penalty. It's a capital offense to pass a $20 fake bill. Whoa.
Yeah.
And then this, and then the overreaction by the guy. I mean, he just murders the guy on camera. It's the most appalling thing. I've ever seen, captured by camera. I mean, I've seen Holocaust photos of the Zapruder film. I mean, it goes on and on and on, but I've never seen anything quite as gruesome and horrifying as that. And I feel like there's a bigger picture there somewhere. And when I hear that these guys worked for the same nightclub in security for something like over a decade, it might have been 2 decades, and they never, that everyone assures us they didn't know each other. Well, wait a minute. Do I look like I was born yesterday? Something doesn't add up. I mean, really.
Well, it is a strange world, Mac. That we know for sure.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I don't know what to say. Except that.
Yeah, there's so many more specific stories and details about this past week and more's historic incidents. I mean, because we are witnessing history, my friend. You know that. I know that. These are crazy level historic times that we're living through, and thankfully we're alive and living.
And whatever happened to the virus? This is the only virus I've ever known that was so scared of a riot that it went and hid.
Well, there seems to be news of spikes still, and they keep saying that there's going to be even more deaths by the end of the month than originally predicted. I am not one to suggest that any of this is a hoax, but as always, I think it can be very difficult to navigate truth when it comes to what the hell is going on out there. But to me, it seems simple and easy enough to protect oneself and to dare to protect others by taking small measures. And though I do think the lengthy shelter in place for the reasons that we've talked about before in terms of the other negative impacts of people having to withdraw socially and live in the circumstances of their own mental hygiene is bad enough that it may counter some of the pandemic. But I'm in no hurry to go back to the old normal, and I do. I don't want to invoke the new N word, the new normal.
Yeah. I prefer the new Abby normal.
Yes, Abby something. Abby what? Abby normal.
This headline just came in. Minneapolis City Council pledges to dismantle the police department. This is a developing story. They're going to dismantle an entire police department. How do you do that?
I don't know, but Mac, I've grouped so many of the articles at PsiOp Radio tonight, including a section on all the articles about these bills that they're talking about passing at the federal level to demilitarize the police and to try to make this kind of thing not happen again, both in terms of the cop riding and and the police brutality. But how do you? I mean, I have plenty of activist friends who are fully in favor of maybe not true anarchy, but they're really not into the police, mainly because, well, historically they were created by the people with the wealth to protect the wealth from,
I mean, they're going to follow their orders, just following orders. But yeah, I've got cop friends. I've got people, cop family, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of them, they're out of their minds. They can't believe it's happening either. And I know cops who are afraid of cops. Now, something is wrong with that picture. I'm just going to throw that out there and just, let it sink where it will.
Yeah. I don't know how much longer I want to go into all this stuff, but there's a couple of other strange things afoot. Doom! Earthquakes reported near Yellowstone National Park.
Yikes.
Oh boy! So
God.
while America's psychic underbelly is being wrenched apart in such a severe way with this massive protests and whatnot. Just this idea that that big caldera might be erupting is still rumbling there. Not much new news on the murder hornets, thankfully. But then this other story about monkeys run away with coronavirus test samples after attacking lab technician. Crazy times. Now, there's a couple of other things I just want to touch on before we probably wrap up the show. But and each of these, of course, could be their own show, and maybe they will be. But ever since the president started hawking the anti-malarial drug as a possible countermeasure to the coronavirus, I've been thinking, I keep flashing back to all these news stories over the last 2 decades about anti-malarials causing murder-suicides.
Oh.
And so I keep thinking, oh, great, is, the president, fomenting more mass shootings by getting people hopped up on, whatever, chloroquine or whatever. And I'm not sure, but I immediately also was, just in the last few days, there was this story out of my hometown, San Antonio. Family of 6 found dead in San Antonio home with cryptic note on the door. Another headline, neighbors reeling from horrible tragedy after family found an apparent murder-suicide. So I believe it was 4 kids, the wife and the husband. The husband's in the military. And I don't know if they've specifically said that they think that the husband did it, but that would be typical in these incidents, not exclusively so. But it made me flash back to a couple of different things, including come on now. These malarial drugs. So flashback to 2002, Army eyes malaria drug in Fort Bragg killings. And then 4 years later, they're still reporting on Fort Bragg killings linked to drug, ? Flash forward to 2013, anti-malarial drug linked to Sergeant Robert Bales massacre, I believe, in Afghanistan, convicted of killing 16 people. And then, in 2017, murder-suicide raises question about anti-malarial drug. I don't know. There's probably no connection, but it just seems strange that and at least one anti-malarial drug, Lariam, I think is the one that's most often been linked in these cases. Yeah. But then there's this mefloquine and the chloroquine, I guess, that's been currently talked about. So I was thinking about it in those terms, but then also, and there's probably no connection. This is just pure Miles just going, I don't know, thinking about stuff. But so this past week, this photograph of this adorable young boy, Devont Hart, whose photo of him hugging the police officer in 2014 went viral, and which has this tragic ending that I became aware of a few years ago, where I described one of the worst familial mass domestic murder suicides that I've ever heard of, where family of 8 feared dead after their SUV plunged off a cliff. So he was one of those adopted kids. I believe it was a lesbian couple who had adopted these kids, and they were just beautiful, adorable children. But the stories from their neighbors about them showing up on their doorstep and the seeming, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say abuse on the part of from the parents, but it was clear that there was a very troubled situation. But this photo started circulating again, I think partly because people were immediately assuming it was a current photo, or they were reminded of, oh, well, here's how we can come together because it was such a touching photo, but it just has such a sad, dark ending. And I'm the kind of person, I'm just like, when I see that kind of thing, I'm like, just so you know, here's the awful truth. So I don't know. I just, as we've obviously reported many times on mass shootings and whatnot on this show, and me being a survivor of one, I also provide a link to. I'm almost finished now, I think, with this Texas Monthly April issue article, the school shooting that Austin forgot. And I know that Mack, you were telling me this came up in one of our shows. I don't remember which one, about the Murchison school shooting here in 1978. Where it wasn't a mass shooting. It was just the teacher, but strange case. I'm going to finish the article, and it's been very cathartic reading it. That's for sure. I think one last thing I just wanted to mention towards the top of our long link page tonight. I provide a link to one of my favorite synchromystics, Alan Green, who manages Sync Book Press. He was also nominated or awarded Top Synchromystic of 2017 by Lauren Coleman several years ago, as well as Synchromystic of the Year in 2014. He's been doing a series exploring the synchronicity surrounding this time period we're in, the kind of king kill murder, sacrificing of the king kind of pre-synchromistic ideas of James Shelby Downard, who is obviously a controversial figure. But and I know that this kind of thinking is very much magical thinking and goes off into areas that are diverge from our usual fact-based attempts at analysis. But I really do find that Alan has a really good sense of things and a good moral compass, and says the most important things, including towards the end of this particular video I linked to, called Hindsight 2020. It's episode 4 in a series he's doing called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and it is an amazing collection of synchronicities surrounding these ideas and our coronavirus times. So I just wanted to highly recommend that folks check that link out that is to his episode 4, Hindsight 2020, Alan Green, Synchronistic Analysis.
Okay.
So, but Mac, we don't have to end it abruptly now. I just wanted to get that out of the way. I don't know what all you might want to talk about here towards the end of the show. What are your thoughts?
Well, gosh, I feel that people should be out in the streets protesting. They should stand up for what they believe in.
Absolutely.
I don't think they should have to risk their lives, though. My feeling is, for me, it wouldn't do me any good. It wouldn't do anybody any good if I went out and got hurt. But I strongly support the rights. These are fundamental, universal rights granted by God. These are basic human rights. The right to protest without being shot at by the police, and the freedom of the press, to me, is sacred. And you don't interfere with that. And when I see a systematic violation of that right, well, that's all I need to know. Because you don't violate that right unless you got something to hide, unless you're a criminal. And I think that the criminals are in charge, and the criminals are in charge of the police departments and have been for a long time, and it's time for it to change.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say for now.
Well, right on. I agree with that. The other crazy, weird thing I wanted to mention tonight. A good old friend of mine from the 1990s, from the 1990s zine scene. He's been a guest on this show once. Unfortunately, it was the night that you were off the show sick. We almost never do any shows where it's just me. But we did this one, and this was it was one of 2 shows that we did. Actually, no, wait, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the one with Lauren Coleman where it was to memorialize Fortean anomalist researcher John Keel, famous author of the Mothman Prophecies, when he passed. It was the first show memorializing John Keel that you were out sick, and that was Lauren Coleman. You actually were on the show with my friend Dr. Stephen Mizrak. He wasn't a doctor then, I don't think, or maybe he was in the process of becoming one, anthropology being the doctorate. So, and a good old friend of mine from the zine days, and recently reconnecting with him online, and he blew my mind today. So let's see if I can find this here. Yeah, okay. So I think we've talked about this strange UFO cult on the show before. There's a number of UFO religions around the world. The most obvious one that people are going to remember would be the Heaven's Gate cult that committed suicide. But there's an older one called the Umites, and he blew my mind. Oh, so apparently this right wing coronavirus denier, former police general, is also a UMO contactee, and he is now the leader of Italy's Orange Vest movement.
Wow.
So here I've got up on the screen this article from Politico.eu. Italy's Orange Jackets want, quote-unquote, power to the people. It took a pandemic, but anti-establishment anger has put the movement on the political map. And there you see this man, this general, what's his name? General Antonio Papalardo, and leading a protest there in Rome or Italy. And apparently 10 years ago, he published a novel about his contact with what he believed was somebody from another world that's connected to the Umo mythology. Now, the Umo thing in a nutshell, it's been a while. I haven't need to brush up on this, but there was a alleged series of UFO sightings, some of which have been debunked. Jacques Vallée is one of the few who's reported extensively on this from the West. This all took place in Spain. And an unfolding mythology occurred whereby a number of researchers started receiving in the mail tons and tons of material that purported to be from these Umites, from these otherworldly beings, and often supposedly included very technical science and information that surely no human could, or no earthly human. And but apparently this General Papalardo tells of his 2000 meeting with an alien. And so from the Google translated Italian notizie.it website, the Italy Liberation Movement and the Orange Vests, 2016 to 2019. Since 2016, Papalardo has been president of the committee of the 12 wise founders of the political movement Movimento Liberazione Italia, which refers to the Forconi movement and which has the aim of restoring power to the sovereign people by removing it from parliament considered abusive. In 2019, he helped found the Orange Vest, a second political movement with which he ran for regional elections in Umbria. The list garnered 587 votes without being elected. And then it goes on to list artistic activities. In 2010, he published a novel, Utopia del Umita. Antonio Papalardo claims that the content of the novel is of alien origin, as the manuscript was delivered to him by an extraterrestrial from the planet Umo, whom he met 10 years earlier. And then there is a link to... Oh, I thought I put it in here. Oh, gosh, where'd it go? Well, dang it. So there's a Yahoo... Well, where'd it go? Ah, dang it. I've lost the link. Oh, wait. No, here it is. Okay. So Yahoo Finance, the Italian version, did this little article about Papalardo and this alien connection. And This is from June 2nd, 2020. And this is the Google Translate version. So, if it's stilted English, there you go. At the helm of his orange vest for a few days now, the former Carabinieri General Antonio Papalardo seems to have returned to the crest of the wave, even organizing a protest in Rome on the occasion of the Republic Day. After being one of the spokespersons of the Italian anti-vaccinists, he's an anti-vaxxer, the former parliamentarian has in fact long been at the helm of a denial movement that does not believe in the existence of the coronavirus and hopes for the resignation of the current guilty government to control citizens through the lockdown. Perhaps not everyone remembers, however, that according to Papalardo himself, all this would be part of a very specific plan, a plan that the general received 20 years ago, directly from the hands of an alien. Papalardo tells of his meeting with an alien. The meeting with the extraterrestrial creature was told by Papalardo now 2 years ago in a video published on his social profile. In the movie in question, the book, the general claimed to have come into contact with an alien in February 2000 during a walk with his wife near his country house located near Rome and L'Aquila. In the story, Papalardo explains that the alien came from the planet Umo and that he would have given him a manuscript with instructions on how to save humanity. Quote, "This man approached him. He wore a long gray raincoat on him, a scarf. He also had a hat on his head." It sounds pretty ordinary. When he saw my wife, he greeted her very gallantly. This fact reassured me in some way. Then turning to me, she said, "I'm an alien and I'm from another planet." At the beginning, I smiled because as a carabinieri, I questioned several people who said they had met aliens, but it never happened to me. As the ex-general recounts, the aliens' indications were to publish the manuscript exactly 10 years later, which actually happened when in January 2010, Papalardo published his book entitled, what I said earlier. Why did you turn to me? It is true that I write novels and essays, but I am not known. I give it to her because she is a free man, and I am sure that even after reading what is written, she will publish it. Please do so within 10 years. According to what was stated by the ex-officer of the Arma, therefore, the manifestations of the orange vest would be a direct emanation of the wishes of an extraterrestrial being worried about the fate of the planet Earth.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm worried. Seriously.
They already got him in his Guantanamo orange. Orange
what
vest.
What does that tell you? Yeah. Oh, no. Yikes.
Well,
the orange vest people.
Thank you, good friend Stephen Mizrek, for that amazing information. I don't know whether that has been reported in Western UFO circles since it's apparently been out there for a while. But we'll see if we can find out anything more about that. But the Umites have they're not as prolific perhaps as the Raelians, more of a French UFO cult that's got places around the world. They're the ones that were cloning and like to have their sexy female followers go topless. Not as exciting as that. Yes, but the Umites have churches around the world, but I didn't think we're quite that prolific. So strange days indeed, my friend.
I wish I had the song handy. It's a John Lennon song. Strange days indeed. Whoa. Whew. Most peculiar, Mama.
Yes. Well, Mac, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I suppose that we'll do this again very soon if we can live to tell the tale.
If we can live to tell the tale. Therein lies the tale.
Well, my friend, if you stay on the line, we can chat afterwards. Otherwise, folks out there, whether you're listening via anomalyradio.com with just the audio stream or over at our Anomaly Radio YouTube channel, thank you for joining us. If you're listening to this later in the podcast form, well, thank you. Drop us a line. Give us some feedback. You can go to mackwhite.com or smileslewis.com and find out all the things that we're involved with. And I wish you all listening to the sound of our voices the very best, even those who have committed atrocities. I don't tend to be a God-fearing kind of Christian, but I do think maybe if there is any justice in this universe, they'll be judged. But I'm also all about forgiveness. So it's time
good night and good luck
to come together. Good night. and away. Come on. Hello, computer. Computer, you going to play something for me? Here we go. Any second now. I swear to God, you will play this.